And now,
ladies and gentlemen,
please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to PreneurCast.
Business cards being swapped, beers being drunk.
Can I say a nasty word? Can I say procrastination?
With Pete Williams and Dom Gocher.
how well did that go down?
We can talk about that entire thing in a very another rant and soapbox episode if we want to.
Visit us online at preneurmedia.tv.
Hi folks, and welcome to this week's episode of PreneurCast. We've got an interview for you this week with Pete and a guy called Ari Galper. Now, Ari is an American guy who lives in Australia, which is a little bit different, and he produces a selling system called Unlock the Game. Now, Ari is a bit of an expert on traditional selling and conversion and negotiating. And this is part of something that Pete and I have started to do. We started to look for people that can help us address some of the issues that are raised by those topics that we talk about in the 7 levers. So we talk about conversion. We also talk about negotiating with your suppliers for better margins. So, and these are traditional skills that when you're actually talking to real people, it's not about online. This is offline stuff. Okay, you know we talk quite a lot about online in each one of our shows. So we thought it was really important to go back to basics and talk about some of these really kind of old school skills. They're very important even in an online business. It's going to apply to everybody. So Pete's had a great conversation with Ari. Watch out up front because Ari is a salesman and you might get a little bit of a feeling for that at the front half of the show. But the back half of that show, Pete and Ari really do get some great takeaways. So get ready to take some notes, and here comes Pete and Ari.
So Ari, welcome to the show. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me, Pete. We're excited to be here with your subscribers.
So before we kind of, I guess, jump into the whole selling side of stuff and really talk about that, and obviously we'll no doubt touch on some 7 levers related elements, probably let's give some bit more context beyond my introduction. So can you share a bit about your background and your story with the listeners?
Sure. Well, as you probably caught the accent, I'm from the U.S. originally, but met an Aussie online on a dating site, and used my no pressure sales approach to make a long story short. Ended up moving here 8 years ago, became a citizen, non-citizen, now have 3 kids, live near Bondi Beach, and very happy here in Australia. So that's a little background on the personal side. But I will tell you a story behind Unlock the Game and how we met the concept and what it's all about trust-based selling, because it is a pretty powerful starting point. I think I give your folks a good idea of kind of where it came from. So,
perfect.
About 9 years ago, I was a sales manager at a software company, and I was managing about 18 salespeople. And we sold the first website tracking software for like hits and page views and unique visitors. It was called Website Story at the time, and one of the first. And of course now it's like free on Google Analytics. It doesn't cost any money, but back then actually it was pretty hefty price point. But we were growing very fast, and my job was not only to manage the sales team but also to bring in the very large accounts. And so for about 6 months, I've been working on this one account for a long time, big opportunity. And if I close this one sale, then it would have doubled the revenues of the company just in itself, that one sale alone. So you can imagine a lot of excitement around this opportunity, Absolutely. A lot of phone calls, my initial contact. He invited me to have a conference call finally with all the decision makers. And the day finally came. We were all very excited because we thought, this would be it. And so a lot of buzz in the company that day, and I'll never forget it. 11 o'clock, I think it was on Friday, and I was in the conference room, and we had a big conference table, and the side of the room has all windows, and like half the company had their ears like against the windows, trying to listen in.
Very cool picture.
Because they're already like counting their bonuses in their mind, and they're all pretty excited.
Yep.
So I actually pulled the curtains down so I wouldn't get too nervous. But it was me and our director in the room, and I dialed the number, the speakerphone, and I dialed the client's office, and it went right into the conference table of their offices in New York. And there's a big company, and so I dialed and I heard all these voices, and I was actually in the room with everyone around the table. And my contact, said, "Look, welcome, Ari. Let me have everyone go around the room and introduce themselves." So as you would in a conference call, going around and say, "Hello, my name is John. I'm the CEO. My name is Mike. I'm the head of VP of IT." And all the decision makers were in that room. It was like, the ideal sales call.
Yep.
So After going around the room, I began to introduce myself and give them a demonstration of our live statistics and data that we collected over the internet, through the computer at their screen at their offices, and show them a demo of our product. And I started walking them through it, and I started hearing noises on the call like, ooh, this is great, this is fantastic. They were really, really impressed with the content that they were saying. David said to me, Ari, fantastic demo. We love what we're seeing here. And they asked me all kinds of questions, like how much does it cost, how to implement it, and I had all the right answers. There was like no resistance. It was like a love fest on the phone. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's sort of...
There's no pushback.
Yeah, so I guess from a typical perspective that you're getting all the yes answers and all the buying questions. Is that a fair...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it was like a dream sales call. I mean, it was just like perfect. And so they were going back and forth. Ari, great job. An hour long, just a lot of interest, a lot of engagements. And I was on a high. I was literally floating off the floor, I think, and already like thinking in my mind, let's see, what car do I want to buy next year?
Yeah.
Like this is a done deal.
That shopping list is being ticked off. So what happened there? That's obviously not the end of the story.
Yeah, so anyways, the call comes to an end, and they said, no worries, Ari, give us a call in a couple of weeks and follow up with us. I said, no problem, thank you so much for your time. And as I say my goodbyes, and I reach for the speakerphone to hit the off button, by complete accident, and now I say divine intervention, my thumb, by accident, hit the mute button instead of the off button.
Okay.
They were right next to each other on the phone system. And they thought I had actually hung up the phone.
Yep.
And a little voice inside of me said, Ari, pull your thumb back. Go to the dark side. Listen into the customer world. And be a fly in the wall and just see what they have to say, Here are the kudos. So I listened to my intuition. I pulled my thumb back. They thought I hung up the call. And they started talking amongst themselves, thinking I had left the conversation.
Okay. That's always good to sort of, be that fly on the wall, as you said, looking over the shoulder and getting to hear exactly what's going on, which is every salesperson's dream, obviously.
Exactly. Or a nightmare, depending how you look at it. So yeah, anyway, so I was hoping to hear really good things, but let me tell you what I heard exactly verbatim, word for word. What they said was this. They said, we're not going to go with him. Keep using him for more information, and make sure we shop someplace else cheaper.
Okay.
Ouch.
Which is a very ouch sort of moment. You're hearing all the buying questions, and they're obviously engaged in the solution, but obviously not what you were particularly selling, which is not great.
Yeah, so I was in a state of shock.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, we just had the perfect sales call, and now what I'm hearing was not what they were saying. And I just sat there shaking. Literally, I went white, and I said to myself, what did I do wrong? And I finally had enough strength to hit the off button. And I looked at the wall, and I had my first epiphany. The first big idea I had was this, that somewhere along the way, it has become socially acceptable not to tell the truth to people who sell. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep.
It's perfectly okay to say things like, sounds good, send me information, send me a proposal, without having any intention of buying.
And I'm sure listeners...
That was the first...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm sure listeners experience that all day. I know, one of my companies is a telecommunications company, and we've got offices, multiple states around the country, and our sales guys hear that all day, every day. It's okay to just send me a proposal, we'll look at the quote, we'll look at the solution, and it is very much a common thing you hear, and I guess the normal reaction to that is a positive thing. It's like, oh, we're progressing closer to that checkbook.
Right, that's what we think we're doing. We end up chasing what I call ghosts.
Okay.
And I'll get into that a little bit. But essentially, I realized that moment that there is an invisible river of pressure underneath every sales conversation. Now, you can't see it, and they can't see it, but boy, can everybody feel it, can't they?
Yeah.
They can feel that river of pressure underneath every sales moment in the process. So I realized that moment, if I can figure out a system and a way to remove the sales pressure from the conversations in the sales process, I will have invented the first ever methodology of helping people in sales focus on one thing more important in the sale, and that is the truth. of whether it's a fit with them or the client.
Yep.
So I invented my entire Unlock the Game platform based upon the idea that your goal is not to focus on the sale anymore. Your focus is to take the pressure out of the conversation to help both parties get to the truth of whether you're a fit or not in the opportunity. And that's where I called Unlock the Game to kind of break this chasing game everybody hates so much, to help people be more efficient and get to the truth. And that's the whole foundational story behind my Unlock the Game premise and my system and all my client successes. That makes sense.
No, I think it's such, in itself, it's such a true thing, because, you know, you're right. So many people just are trying to be polite and trying to sort of just not hurt anybody's feelings by being that polite and saying what they want or think the salesperson wants to hear, and that just doesn't help anybody. It wastes time and resources, and it doesn't help anything when it comes to conversion. It's just a waste of effort. So I guess if you can come up with a plan of attack to be able to have that honest platform and that conversation with your customer, then it's going to be much more beneficial for everybody, not just waste time. Is that a fair statement?
Right. So if you look at most companies, pipelines, you'll see that they're being measured on behaviors: how many calls they make, how many proposals they make, how many they send out. But in reality, that's the wrong measurement. The real measurement should be how effective were they at getting the truth of the customer.
Yeah.
So they're not playing the chasing game and pushing numbers through. So that's a little teaser towards the next section. But hopefully that's the whole platform and new perspective that I bring to the table.
Okay. So you mentioned there sort of obviously that the way a lot of sales companies are doing things is incorrect. And, you know, I guess whether you're a big sales corporation or even, you know, to a certain extent retail as well. So what are some of the sales myths similar to that, you know, it's a numbers game and stuff like that is worth discussing and sort of getting out on the table here?
Sure, yeah. The first place to start to begin to shift your mindset towards this Unlock the Game premise is, of course, deal with some of the myths that a lot of small entrepreneurs, consultants, coaches, big companies still operate under. And I'll cover a few of those now. So let's start with number one. The first myth, and you can fill in the blank, is sales is a what game?
Numbers game. Yep.
Exactly. And that's a very common notion with most businesses. And let me tell you where that came from, that idea. That notion came from a salesperson making a phone call, getting rejected, and their boss said, just make more calls. Make more calls. It's all about how many calls you make and how many contacts you make, right?
Get right back on that horse.
Exactly. Well, we're challenging that belief system by saying that in this new economy, with trust being so low in the marketplace, it's no longer about how many calls you make or how many contacts you make. It's about how deep you go on each conversation. It's about how good you are at creating trust. It's about how good you are making a human connection in a conversation so you can quickly and efficiently find out if it's a fit or not. That is the new way of thinking, not how many contacts you make and how many leads you burn through anymore.
So you want to make sure that each one of those relationships actually has some value. And like every sales conversation in my mind is it's a relationship being built, and it's not about just, you know, churning and burning and one night stands. It's about trying to have some proper, decent conversations that actually can obviously get closer towards the sale. What other sort of myths are there? There's plenty of them out there. I know you've probably got a lot more experience with them, and I'm sure a lot of people in their minds are hearing these sort of, you know, what has historically been classed as tried and true sales mantra. Like, what other sort of myths do you think there are out there?
Sure. Well, there's a few more that are important to kind of dislodge from people's minds, because we're so wedded to conditioning of our mindset, and we're so used to chasing the sale that in many cases can disrupt the relationship. And that's why it's important that when we work with our clients, we spend a lot of time on their thinking versus their mindset. But let's go to another one. The next one is what I call the sale is lost at the end of the process. And you know that a lot of times when you're in sales or you're on your own, you try and make a sale with a client and it falls through at the end of the process, and you start saying to yourself, oh, you know, I didn't close hard enough, I'm not good at sales. You start beating yourself up, and you wonder why you lost the deal at the end. But let me tell you what's changed, and that is this: in this new economy, the sale is not lost anymore at the end of the process. It's lost at the beginning. Okay. In fact, it's actually lost at hello, and I'll prove it to you right now, okay?
Yep.
So let's say someone calls your office and says to you, hi, my name is, I'm with, we are a, what goes through your mind in about 3 seconds?
Sales pitch, they're going to take money off me, I don't want to talk to them.
It's over at hello, isn't it?
Yep. Absolutely, over. It's like, nah, no interest. You already put the block up, I guess. And it happens here all the time. People know my name and track me down through the various companies and are trying to pitch me stuff. And as soon as I get on the phone call, it's like, I know exactly what you're trying to do, and the conversation just stops right there in my mind. I may be polite, and
exactly.
Do you know what? Exactly what we said. I'll be polite and not want to hurt their feelings, and maybe give them 30 seconds of my time and say, email me something through, because I'm trying to be polite. But it actually talks to exactly what you said before, is I have no real intention. I'm just trying to be polite, which is, not probably the right thing I should be doing as a customer either, funnily enough.
Right. So what's happening here is that we've been conditioned and wired, people who sell, to basically pitch, close their eyes, and hope it sticks. Okay, that's the traditional model of selling. And what you're saying is true, that there's no truth happening here. You as a customer aren't comfortable telling the truth because you don't hurt their feelings, and they're conditioned to basically pitch what they're offering. So you have two ships in the night passing each other. That's why there's so much pain and so much lost opportunity in companies of people who are reps who are chasing opportunities and chasing these what I call ghosts. People who never told them the truth in the beginning, so the sales lost at the end. It wasn't lost at the end. It was lost because trust wasn't created in the beginning. Okay, and that's what our focus, our program is a focus on trust in the beginning, not the end.
Yeah, so the only thing you really lost is just time that you wasted. Yeah,
exactly. And if you build trust in the beginning of the process, guess what? The sale happens on its own without trying to close anybody anymore.
Yeah, no, very, very good point.
So
other sales myths?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any more sales myths worth touching on?
There's another one, a big one I want to mention, one more big one, and that is this idea behind rejection.
Okay.
And as you probably know, you have companies with people and reps, salespeople. Rejection is this notion that we're supposed to accept as part of being business owners, entrepreneurs, and salespeople. We're supposed to accept being tough, rejection as part of the game to be successful. Now, we're challenging that in such a major way because we discovered through our research and our client base that rejection is actually triggered. There are certain triggers that people who sell actually do unconsciously that cause the other person to put their guard up. So imagine if we reveal, which we will today, some of these triggers to people listening to this call, and they were aware of them and remove them from their process. This could be a major breakthrough for people because basically what we're claiming here is that we are the only system in the world that can claim that we eliminate rejection entirely from the sales process because we discovered how to remove the triggers.
Very, very cool. Let me ask you one more thing about sales myths, because I know a lot of people that I talk to when it comes to selling, they're wanting to sort of have that sales scripts. So when when the customer comes up with objections, I have this script that I can use to overcome that objection, and having that sort of stuff already preset. What's your take on objections and objection handling? Because that's a big traditional conversation that's had around selling.
Yeah, so we'll dig into that, and our whole philosophy around scripts is they're mechanical and they're natural, and they sound that way. So we have invented what we call our own trust-based languaging, our own proprietary phrases and words we're going to discuss in a little while. Give you some examples of how you can use our trust-based languaging to not overcome the objection, because that puts pressure on people if what they're telling you is true, but instead to diffuse the objection, to remove the wall down, to re-engage the conversation again. And so one of the triggers about rejection is languaging. If you're saying certain words that associate you with the salesperson stereotype, that creates rejection. So we'll talk today about some trust-based languaging, and my examples coming up, of how it diffuses the objections and re-engages without having to put your ethics on the line at all.
Beautiful. So let's sort of move on, because I know there's something that I'd love to discuss as part of the conversation, and I'm sure a lot of that stuff you just mentioned there will come up in this, but you've got sort of three, I'm trying to make sure I can remember this, it's three mindset principles, I think is the term you use, that sort of is the foundation of the sales process that you teach. Can we touch on those for a moment as well?
Sure. So there's basically three principles behind our philosophy and our platform of thinking around selling. And I'll walk you through those right now and give us a lot of examples to kind of make it more pragmatic for people to understand how they can begin to use this and get some good takeaways from today.
Yep, beautiful.
So the first principle is called diffusing pressure, meaning your goal in the sales process should be 100% focused only on one thing, and that is always focusing on taking pressure out of the conversation to allow the other person to feel comfortable telling you the truth. And I'll give you an example of that right now, a real scenario, using our trust-based languaging. So let's just say, for instance, Pete, you're having a first call with a potential client, okay, first conversation. You call them or they call you, and the call is going well, good conversation, call's coming towards the end. How are we trained typically? What are we supposed to do at the end of a call like that usually? What's the typical process at the end of a call that we're supposed to do to a client like that? What do we usually say?
Well, it's generally trying to future pace it. So you're trying to actually work out what's going to happen next and actually get some sort of commitment and consistency from the caller. So sort of, where are we going to go next? What's the next step we have to take? That's generally what we tell and have a conversation with our sales team about, is trying to future pace it and work out where we're going to go next and continue that conversation, I guess, in that forward direction.
Yes, so what you're saying is right. Traditional selling is focused on moving the conversation forward, right?
Yeah.
Moving towards the next step, moving towards the next conversation. That's what we're wired to do as salespeople. We're supposed to be moving things forward. But what can happen if you attempt to move things forward in that conversation at the end of the call and they're not ready yet? What can be broken right there?
That's the trust, the rapport is just going to go straight away.
Exactly. So in our world, we don't try and move things forward. In fact, we try to avoid momentum towards the sale, because that puts pressure on people. What we do instead is this, and here's the scenario again. So we're having a good call comes to an end. Rather than saying, hey, let's move things forward, let's see you next Tuesday, we use our trust-based languaging, and we say this. We say, where do you think we should go from here? And I'll say it again. Where do you think we should go from here?
So you're putting it back onto them.
How do you suppose? Yes. Back on. How do you suppose that changes the energy of the call?
Well, I think it does show that you're not going to be pushy like a traditional salesperson. It'll differentiate you as a salesperson from everybody else, because you're not saying, I guess what you kind of touched on before, is those traditional trigger words that automatically elicit a certain type of response from the person. It's different. It's going to shake them up, because they're going to go, well, hang on, this is a question I probably haven't been asked before, and it's going to actually make them actually think about it and engage a response, as opposed to just elicit a stock standard automatic response. That's sort of how I would see that.
Right. So what we're doing here is we're actually humanizing the conversation early on in the process. You see? And what's interesting is the potential client, when they hear this from you, they're in a state of shock.
Yep.
They can't believe they're being treated like a human being with a business. It's just so countercultural. And that shock in itself is the beginning of the trust-building process. Because what happens is here, if you begin to unlock the game, your whole business becomes differentiated not just on what you're selling, but how you are selling. As we begin when companies engage us, they realize they can't compete over time on their product because of commoditization. The internet, one more feature, one more price point, that can't win anymore. What's left in the tool bag is trust building. And so we shift the whole process around focusing on the trust of the relationship, and because sale comes from that, not just the features of the product. And when you say to someone, where do you think we should go from here, that's the beginning of creating a differentiation brand in the mind of the client, realizing, wow, this is a whole different experience.
Yeah, I think the thing that I take away from that personally is not only just the trust-based conversation that you've just had there, but I think the biggest thing that I see, which I kind of touched on, was that it's going to actually shake them up, because as we touched on earlier, that so many sales conversations go down this same sort of straight line approach every single time. Is I say this as a salesperson, customer, you respond like this. Then as a salesperson, I say this, and as a customer, they respond like this. And it kind of just goes that same sort of wave every single conversation. Whereas, when you can start throwing in conversations and questions and statements and language that break that pattern, it's a pattern interrupt, which actually will get them out of that traditional, sales response process and actually get them more engaged in that conversation themselves. Because I think so many people, what they do as salesmen and saleswomen is that they just put the person into an unconscious zombie-like customer state. So you need to actually do stuff to pattern interrupt them and get them actually engaged in the conversation again. And things like, where do you think we should go to from here, is a great pattern interrupt question because it's an engaging question that obviously has that whole trust element wrapped around it as well, which you talk about.
And here's what's interesting about this. When you integrate the mindset part of how you think, and you deliver this to somebody in the way I just delivered that, what happens is they begin to tell you the truth. And in the beginning, they say things like, well, I've got one more question. I'm not sure yet. What about this? And what's interesting is they actually, if they are a fit with you, they themselves will say to you, how about we move this thing forward and discuss this next week? And they'll schedule an appointment with you. They do it, not you.
Yeah. And I think also if you sort of align that to another one of Robert Cialdini's influence factors that we speak a lot about on the show here as well, is that if they're the person, you know, telling you in the conversation of what is going to happen next, it's more likely that they'll be committed and consistent to that actual outcome because they're the one who actually made that commitment. It wasn't you forcing the next step on them. It was them coming up with the next step, and they're going to be more likely to be consistent with that. So if they do say, let's chat next week, it's much more likely that to actually happen because there's trust there, but also that commitment and consistency element is there too.
That's absolutely right. And building that conversation and building that trust in the beginning allows the whole sales process to happen naturally by taking the pressure out. So that's exactly right. So if you remember, I mentioned this idea of triggers. Yep. And one of the triggers I mentioned is languaging. Mm-hmm. And one single word in itself can break everything. So that's one trigger. The other trigger is actually delivery, voice tone. So what did you notice when I said, where do you think we should go from here?
Pace slowed down, tonality changed. It was more more empathy in the voice tone. So it showed caring, which obviously elicits trust. So definitely a tonality shift is a big thing there.
Yes, tone is another trigger of rejection because in selling, we are so used to moving quickly, speeding up because we're so afraid of losing the momentum.
True. Absolutely.
Because we think in our mind, we have this illusion in our mind that we have a sale in front of us. So we move so fast, we're so afraid of silence, we're so afraid of being present with a person, that even though we're listening to them, the back of our mind we're thinking to ourselves, oh, this is a good one. This is great. We start talking to ourselves, thinking, moving the sales process forward, and we're not even present with people. Yep. And this is the problem because we're so wired to chase this goal of the sale, which is our goal, we can't even be present with the person at the moment. So when we teach people to work, when we coach people, it's amazing when we role play with them, they start speeding up. And we go, what are you doing? And we realize that they're carrying what we call sales armor on. They're carrying armor to protect themselves because they're afraid if they slow down, they're going to get rejected. And this all comes from old school conditioning of chasing that sale. So we work with people to stay more calm, slow down, and pause, and most importantly, do not create momentum. This is so this is so anti-contrarian to selling because in sales we're supposed to be what? Enthusiastic, right?
Yep.
We're supposed to love what we do, right?
Yep. And it just elicits all those natural.
But the interesting thing is,
I was going to say, and when you do those sort of traditional things, it elicits that natural flight or fight type response in the customer, which is not what you want.
Correct. So being enthusiastic about your solution early on in the process is exactly the wrong thing to do because it's not about what you're selling at the moment. It's about identifying if it's a fit with them or not and solving the problem. That's a major shift for most companies and people who sell because they're not used to letting go of the end goal. And what's interesting is this. When you shift your salespeople away from focusing on the sale and focusing on the truth, sales double because they're not chasing people anymore on the illusion they think they're going to buy. If that makes sense.
Yep, no, absolutely. So is there anything else in the first mindset principle we should touch on there, or could we go on to the next thing? I sort of don't want to sort of waste all that time on principle and leave things missing for the listeners.
Yeah, no worries. Let's go to number 2, and that is this whole idea of getting to the truth. People go, what does that mean, Ari? It sounds so, very abstract. What does truth mean? Well, what I mean is this. I mean, getting the truth with people means allowing your potential client to feel totally comfortable telling you exactly what's on their mind.
Yep.
The truth, what they're actually thinking. And I'll give you an example of that. A couple examples, actually. Let's say someone calls your office and says to you, I'm looking at your phone systems. I'm very interested. Please send me information about what you guys have to offer.
Yep.
The typical reaction to that is what in most companies? Is it what? Sure, what's your postal code, right?
Yep.
What's your address? And
give me your details.
we'll send it out to you right away. Yep. And then we'll give you a call and we'll follow up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely, hey, I've got interest. That's a good thing.
Right. Well, I'll make one caveat to that. When I mentioned about keywords that you should not be using, one of the most important words, sales words to remove from all vocabulary and selling is the word follow-up.
Yep.
Because what's the only industry in the world to use the word follow-up?
Sales.
Exactly. So why the heck would you ever want to use a term that connects you to the stereotypical process that everybody hates so much? So we replaced all the languaging to take the pressure out. So rather than saying, I'm just calling to follow up, what you say instead is, I'm just giving you a ring to see if you have any feedback from our previous conversation. And that's going backwards, the opposite direction, not forward. So a little caveat there. But back to this example of sending information. Most people just react to sending information out. They chase people down. And they end up having this huge pipeline with nothing coming out of it. So in our world, when someone calls us and says, send me information to our clients, what we say is, not a problem. Be happy to. It might make sense to first figure out or identify what your 2 or 3 core issues are you're trying to solve. Then I can know exactly what to send you. Would you be open to that?
Yep, it's a great another pattern interrupt. You're not doing that typical sort of response. I love it.
Exactly, and then you're back into a conversation again. And another example, I'll tell you. Recently, I had a call come to my office, and I picked the phone up, and I heard this on the phone. I heard, "Hello, Ari. My name is Michael. I'm with XYZ company. They're a big company in Australia. They have an old building in the CBD in Sydney. You recognize the name. And I'm the senior vice president of sales. And we're looking at you and 2 other thought leaders in selling to change our culture and improve our business next year. And we want to know, first of all, we're at phase 1 right now, collecting information. We want to know, first of all, why should we go with you? Why are you the best? And give me your best sales pitch."
Okay. So
he's putting pressure on me now.
Yep. Interesting.
And that's the game, isn't it? That's the sales game, right?
Yeah.
Pressure back and forth. So he doesn't realize he's made the wrong call that morning to the wrong person. But let me tell you what I said. I responded to him. And I took a very deep breath because I'm a human being too. And I took a deep breath and I said to him, I lowered my voice and said, "Well, isn't that interesting?"
Okay.
Because over here, our company, we have a very similar process to you. We have a phase 1 where we ask some questions, collect some information, see if we're a good fit. And if we're a good fit, then we decide where to go from there. Would you be open to that?
Yep. Okay, so you
That's
basically
all I said to him.
You twisted around a little bit. How was his response to that?
Well, first of all, there was no response. He was totally silent. There was no word on the other side of the phone. And I said, "My God, did I lose him?" And the next thing I hear is I feel the breath come across the phone. Like he actually breathed. And he lowered his voice. And he says to me, "Okay, what kind of questions do you have for me?"
Perfect.
Next thing I know, we're having this really nice conversation, human to human, and after a few minutes, I determined 1, he's not a decision maker. 2, he's just curious as to what we do.
Yep.
So I sent him off some free information on my site. He was quite happy with that. I hung up the phone. Now, what did that just save me months of?
Just follow up. Can't use that term again. Pointless
Exactly.
follow up.
It's a drug. It's a drug called hopium.
Okay, I like it. Hopium. Yep.
Some people have this drug that's in their bodies activated where they hope they got the deal. They go to their boss, they go, "Oh my God, guess what? This company called me today. It looks really good for the month. We hit our numbers and I'm so excited." They run back home to the wife about it and they put numbers on the board and they live in this hopium dream. And in reality, they never got to the truth.
Yeah. So it's almost about it's almost I guess like going about a process to eliminate the tire kickers in a much more cleaner way to sort of, so you're trying to get to the truth quicker, so you actually are not wasting your time on those tire kickers and those people who are just going through the process for process's sake. Because I think a lot of people, particularly when they're starting out in business, in their first couple of years of business, every lead and every sale is a good sale and the best sale that they ever need to make. And we actually kind of spoke around that topic a couple of weeks ago on the show about that, there is times when you shouldn't actually take on certain clients and make that sale. And, before you even get there, as you're talking to, there's plenty of times when you shouldn't even entertain the proposal or entertain the conversation. And if you can have a system in place to get to the truth quicker, it allows you to identify that and feel more confident when you do say no to people when they don't fit you. Is that a fair statement?
Very well said. In fact, most small businesses basically chase anything that moves in their vicinity.
They're a 15-year-old, they're a 15 and 16-year-old high school teenager again.
Exactly, and this is the problem: is they don't have a system, like you said, to mechanically and systematically sift out those who are real or not. They don't have the languaging to disengage without hurting the relationship. And that's what we provide as a model to be able to let go of people who are playing the game, and you help them relax and get the truth. And what's interesting about this whole process is the ones that benefit the most from this are the salespeople, people who feel relieved from this because they can actually make phone calls, call back opportunities without feeling pressure of closing the sale, but instead focusing on the truth. And that's what we're trying. We're trying to help people really enjoy their process again. And what's interesting is that they get a huge improvement because they realize that in their current throughput, their current system right now, their current leads and opportunity, a lot of that stuff in there is all just air. It's just not real because they never ever thought about the idea, well, geez, maybe we should focus on the truth.
Absolutely. So we've established the truth. We're getting there. What's the third biggest mindset shift that I think people in the sales game, and this is, I guess, a big thing which we probably should have touched on earlier, is that everyone's in sales. And whether you sort of, and I know a lot of the context in what we're talking about here at the moment is conversations about, long form sales, and not talking about long form sales copy, but long form sales where it's a proposal, follow up, conversion. But sales and this same methodology applies to even sort of one-off conversations in the retail store, I'm sure. So let's just sort of get that out there as well. Sure. Yeah, it applies to short sales cycles like one phone call. It applies to long sales models that require meetings, proposals, demonstrations. And the reason why sales cycles are usually so long is because of the lack of trust in the middle of the whole thing, which extends it. Yep. So now we've got that sort of, elephant in the room out of the way. What's the third mindset that people need to sort of change when it comes to selling?
Sure. The third one is a big one, and that is the idea of focusing on becoming a problem solver rather than a pitch person.
Yep.
What I mean by that is converting your solution, what you do, into the problems you help your clients solve. And that might sound logical to all people listening to this call at first glance, but let me tell you, this is a shift because we're talking about this idea that your conversation should not be focused on what you're selling anymore. Your focus should be on what problems you're helping the client solve. So when you begin to, we invented something we call it a problem statement. It's an opening phrase you can use to enter a conversation with referrals or inbound leads, outbound calls, where you don't begin the call with, hi, we offer this, we are a provider of, but instead you begin the conversation, open the dialogue around issues that your solution solves.
Yep.
And it's interesting, we find this when we do live events, we have exercise where we have actually people use a little, draw a tree out and a branch of the tree, and we have them write on each branch all the problems they help their clients solve. And they even have a hard time articulating that because they're so used to features and benefits.
Yeah.
And so we work them through a process where they come out with the other end of it with this really great tactical problem written with languaging from the client point of view, and now their entire sales process is wrapped around the problem. So when you call somebody back, you don't call and say, hi, I'm just calling about the phone system you're thinking about buying. You call and say, I'm just giving you a ring to see if you're still open to solving the problem of having communication happen between your different offices more efficiently.
Yep. Absolutely. I think you
so when we go ahead.
I was going to say, you're absolutely right. That's a big thing is to sort of, and I think something we do talk about in the show quite a bit is that it's very much that everyone's business solves a problem, and that's what you need to really focus on is solving the problems, not necessarily actually making the sale. The sale comes as a side benefit or as a byproduct of supplying the solution.
Yes, exactly right. See, we're so conditioned to sell the future. Meaning, if you buy our phone system, you buy our software, this will happen. We just sell the future all day long. But people, unfortunately, now in business can't think past tomorrow. I mean, they can't be past the last hour, So here we are focusing on trying to sell the future. We aren't even focused on their current problems on their plate right now. So the real secret here is when you begin to own the mindset, get languaging down, and develop your own problem statements around what you do for people, you are bulletproof. You can enter any conversation anytime you want with a potential client in your marketplace because you know them better than they know themselves. In fact, when I do live engagement with companies, I actually make live sales calls in the room to their clients to demonstrate how I don't even have to need to know the features and benefits of other products. I just need to know the problems to help people solve, and I can begin the dialogue around a problem that expands out to great things.
No, very cool. And absolutely, I think that's awesome. Because it is very much, at least in the initial part of the conversation, is that when you actually do the proposal, that's when it really matters to know the nuts and bolts of what it is. But it's not about the product when you're doing the solution and problem analysis, because anyone who's articulate and can think on their feet can have that conversation and address what the problems are that someone actually has.
Well, here's a couple last caveats here is this whole idea of kind of like consultative selling and solving problems isn't necessarily new. We've always been known we have to ask questions, right, about a business. But the problem is in this day and age, you can't enter a conversation asking questions about their business. They're not going to tell you the truth. They don't trust you. You see? So you have to enter the conversation already articulating and knowing their problems. That's what creates the trust because you understand them better, and that opens up the entire sales process without pressure and makes sales happen a lot faster.
Yeah. So I just want to really sum up really quickly because I think that the one big takeaway for me here is I think if people can just walk away from this and just start asking different questions, questions like, where do you think we should go from here? If they just take this after the end of this conversation, actually start implementing that in their business and actually start consciously sort of looking at the change that actually happens with the engagement level of the people they're speaking to, I think just that one nugget will actually, at least show them what's possible with this sort of way of selling and just implement that one question very, very easily, very frictionless sort of implementation for this week's show. We always try and leave people with an action point to do. And I think the action point for this week is to actually just start asking that specific question when they speak to people, whether it is on the phone or in the retail outlets or wherever it might be, just having that sort of conversation, and then with that mindset of looking for the trust and asking questions to actually get to the truth of things, not asking questions to actually make the sale, and sort of just see how that works and the engagement level and the response you get from the customers and clients and prospects you have over the next week, and then you can sort of decide where to go from there. So I guess this probably leads us on to let me ask you this question. Let me put the question onto you. Where should people go from here if they sort of do implement this and trial and test that question in their business over the next 5 or 6 days and really see some amazing engagement change with their clients and their prospects? Where should they go to find out more, Ari? Let's sort of let you to answer that question.
Well, definitely what you just said is right. Go ahead and test some of the languaging, see what happens. You'll see what will happen. Wonderful things will start happening to you. Then you should come to our website. We have a free test drive. It's unlockthegame.com, just like it sounds. Unlockthegame.com, a free test where you can actually take a sampling of our material, listen to our audios, and see if it's a fit for you, matches your personality and your values. If it's a good fit, then we have on our site a starter kit. You can download right away and get access to the languaging and you apply it to almost every sales scenario, outbound call, inbound call. There's action cards in there and really good tools to apply. And when that starts to work and more money is rolling into your bank account, then give us a ring. We'll talk further from that point forward. But I think the free test drive is a place to start in sampling our program, and we made it really easy to do that at a low price point to get people started in our world. And again, this is only for people who really believe trust is their core value and don't like the idea of selling the old way.
Absolutely. So we'll put that in the show notes like we do for every episode. So over at PreneurMedia.tv, the home of the podcast, and you can get the show notes and links to Ari's sites, and in particular, unlockthegame.com. So go off, everyone. Start asking those sort of questions, those language-based questions in your business. And as always, if you know 2 people in your world right now who are in selling, who are selling in their business and have that sort of stuff, we always suggest you actually, take the link to this show, email it to those 2 people, show them that you can offer them value as a friend and a networker, and say, hey guys, it's a really cool podcast I listened to this week. One really cool question that might help you, test in your sales scenario. Here's the question. Here's where you can find out more about it, and share the podcast with other people and help them grow their business through sales and Ari Galper's trust-based selling methodology, like we've spoken about today. So Ari, mate, thank you so much for your time and sharing this sort of the questions and the trust-based selling theory and methodology, because I think it is something that people really need to grasp. And we talk about this regularly on the show, the importance of selling, particularly in the framework of the 7 levers that, without selling you can't convert, and without conversions you don't make money. So, I think your approach to this is a much better way and a much easier and more frictionless way to actually get to that sale in a much better way. So thanks for your time.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate having me. We'll talk to you soon. No problem. Thank you.
You've been enjoying another fine episode of PreneurCast with Pete Williams and Dom Gocher. Make sure to hang out with the boys online at PreneurMedia.tv or drop them a line via PreneurCast@PreneurGroup.com.